Hello, viewer number 87. What you're about to see ends in disaster. Whenever possible, pay attention to the experience as a whole. You're watching Perception Culture. On the 19th day of the month of December, in a late decade of a century not too long before our own, the human race encountered an alternative ending of a movie, different to its original director's cut, and this theatrical ending surfaced, as such endings often do, in the seemingly most innocent and unlikely of places.
What happened was that we went to San Jose for the first preview, and the audience was incredible until we killed Audrey and Seymour, and it became an icebox. Bottom line, you have to have like a 55% recommend in order to release it. Ours was 13%. It was an unmitigated disaster, a total disaster.
But which was more disastrous, the tragic fate of the main characters or the audience's inability to accept an unhappy ending? The year is 1959 and Roger Corman, equipped with access to a set left standing from his previous project, directs a horror comedy written by Charles B. Griffith. In the film, a clumsy florist's assistant Seymour Krelborn develops a talking hybrid plant with an appetite for human flesh. The plant brings fame and success to the failing flower shop, all the while convincing poor Seymour to continue nurturing its carnivorous cravings. In the end, Seymour climbs into the plant intending to kill it with a kitchen knife, but as a result, he ends up being digested himself. Hastily filmed in 2 days and 5 nights, and later distributed as a B-movie without substantial advertising, the film slowly obtained a cult following thanks to the positive word-of-mouth response regarding the original style of humor and unusual plot. Time passed, and in 1982, a rock musical loosely based on the 1960 movie premiered off-Broadway before moving to the Orpheum Theater, a 299-seat off-Broadway venue in Lower Manhattan, with music by Alan Menken and lyrics by Howard Ashman. The show featured music in the style of Motown and early 1960s rock and roll. Running with the award-winning success of the musical, David Geffen, one of the original producers of the off-Broadway show, set off to produce a feature film adaptation. The initial plan was to shoot the film in 3D, with Martin Scorsese directing and Steven Spielberg executive producing. This production, however, was postponed due to ownership disputes with the original auteurs. A copyright renewal notice had not been properly filed on the 1960 film, which was why there could be a stage play in the first place. Corman, the original film's director, had received credit and a settlement from the musical's producers. However, Griffith, who wrote, performed multiple roles, and did the film's second unit photography, received nothing. Eventually, after settlements were reached, Geffen offered the project to director FRANKIE'S.
I remember he asked me through my agent, and I read it, and I said, no, I can't do this. Because it was so wild. It was just 14 songs and a plant that is small and that weighs a ton, and it's 13 feet tall, and all these guest stars. And I mean, how do you do this, you know? And I said no. And then weeks went by, and I was in Toronto shooting something, and my subconscious was working because all of a sudden I realized the key. The key were those 3 girls. On the stage, they came in stage left, stage right, up stage. But here I could just bop them around anywhere cinematically.
The movie musical starts in a starry void with an otherworldly voice announcing the occurrence of a deadly threat to humanity. As the audience settles with this understanding, the organ music climaxes into an upbeat jingle, and it is revealed that the starry void is actually a murky puddle on a disheveled street of Skid Row. 3 girls in bright blue dresses appear, and untouched by the heavy rain, reveal the neighborhood. The buildings are run down, the area littered with garbage, there's people sleeping on the wet ground. It is an unforgiving environment. Here, we find Mr. Mushnick's unsuccessful flower shop. The shelves are empty or filled with dead plants. Seymour, a flower shop assistant who Mushnick took in as an orphan, lives in the musty cellar underneath the store. He is enamored with gentle-hearted Audrey, another flower shop employee, who also feels stuck in Skid Row. She, unfortunately, is in an abusive relationship with a dentist named Orrin. Orrin is a nitrous oxide addicted sadist who enjoys inflicting pain on Audrey, as well as all his patients. When Mr. Mushnick decides it's time to close the store, Audrey and Seymour suggest to take the business in another direction, and introduce Mushnick to Audrey too, a strange and interesting plant Seymour bought from the wholesale flower district after the total eclipse of the sun about a week ago. When they place the plant by the flower shop window, it starts attracting new customers and Mr. Mushnick pressures Seymour to keep the wilting plant alive. To Seymour's surprise, he finds out the plant only grows if you feed it with human blood or flesh. Seymour does his best with giving the plant his own blood, but this is not enough. Eventually the plant starts to talk and convinces him to kill Audrey's sadist boyfriend Orrin and feed him to the plant. Unable to pull the trigger, Seymour watches as Orrin dies from a malfunction of a custom laughing gas mask he is wearing. Seymour does nothing to save him and drags the body to the alley behind the flower shop, where Mr. Mushnick sees him chopping it up with an axe. Mushnick then flees the scene without Seymour noticing him. Seymour feeds Orrin to the plant, and although being traumatized, decides to continue without turning himself in. After learning that Audrey has feelings for him, Mushnick confronts Seymour and threatens to alert the police, but, as he's blackmailing Seymour and offering to let him escape if he leaves the plant behind, Audrey too eats Mushnick. Again, Seymour does nothing to stop the plant and watches in horror as it devours Mushnick. Great success follows. Seymour gets offered a lecturing tour, a TV show, and is featured on magazine covers and news reports. All the while the plant keeps growing. Finally, Seymour realizes this cannot continue. He asks Audrey to marry him. She agrees, and they plan to escape the next day. The plot is set up like a Greek tragedy. It starts with a prologue which introduces the audience to the theme of the narrative. The chorus appears, in the form of Crystal, Renette, and Chiffon, the girls in the blue dresses, who pop up magically throughout the story to comment and explain what is happening. The narrative then follows Seymour's journey in episodes. Firstly, Seymour discovers the plant and it starts to bring him success. Secondly, the plant radicalizes Seymour. And lastly, Seymour realizes he must stop the plant. As with every story, this all leads to a culmination, but here's where things get a little more complicated. When Little Shop of Horrors was released to the wider audience, it showed an ending where Seymour manages to save Audrey from being eaten by the plant, and after declining a contract from a botanical company's executive to breed the plant, Seymour realizes he must destroy Audrey too in order to save humanity. Seymour confronts the plant, learns Audrey too is an alien from outer space, and manages to use an exposed electrical cable from the destroyed shop to electrocute the plant, causing an explosion. Seymour survives, ends up marrying Audrey, and the two move to the suburbs. However, a bug reminiscent of Audrey too is growing in their new garden, which begs the question, was this truly the happy end it was portraying itself as? This theatrical ending serves to set up Little Shop of Horrors as a Faustian parable, where Seymour sacrifices his moral values for material gain and power, something he feels he needs in order to win Audrey's love. However, ultimately he learns that Audrey cares for him regardless of whether he is rich and famous, and he overcomes his moral failure by destroying Audrey too. This ending succumbs to the pick-yourself-up-by-the-bootstraps narrative popular in the Reagan era of the 1980s and is modeled on the hero's journey, a common template used in Hollywood where the main character is transformed through adventure. However, this was not the ending the filmmakers had planned. In the original director's cut, Seymour saves Audrey from the jaws of the plant, but it is too late. Her injuries are too severe. During her last breaths, Seymour admits to feeding Orrin and Mushnick to the plant in exchange for fame and fortune. Audrey asks Seymour to feed her to the plant after she dies, so she too could help Seymour be successful through her death. Seymour respects her wishes but then goes to jump off the roof of the neighboring building in an act of desperation. An executive from a botanical company interrupts him and shows a small Audrey 2 they have developed from a cutting they stole from Seymour's plant. Seymour realizes the plant's desire for world domination and runs to confront it. The executive yells after him that vegetables are in public domain and he doesn't need him. Seymour finally recognizes that the plant is a monster and that his actions, and also inactions, were what gave it so much power. However, the plant has grown so much it no longer requires a pot and can now move by using its roots. Seymour tries to shoot the plant. Audrey 2 destroys the store, and eventually eats Seymour. Crystal, Renette, and Chiffon appear in front of a giant glittery United States flag and deliver the Exodus, the outcome of Seymour's actions. Audrey 2 has become a nationwide success, enjoyed by consumers everywhere who were then sweet-talked into feeding it blood. Now enormous Audrey 2s roam the land, eating people, and destroying everything in sight. Not even the military can go against Audrey 2 as it conquers the Statue of Liberty. No one is safe, not even the viewer, as Audrey 2 breaks through the cinema screen. When audiences are only exposed to happy endings where the main character overcomes their struggles, it belittles the structural inequality people face on a daily basis, and feeds into the narrative that people struggle with inequality simply because they are unwilling to work themselves out of it. This seemingly more brutal ending gives more weight to the economical challenges that our beloved main characters face from the start of the film. Would the plant even have succeeded if it hadn't been able to radicalize Seymour? Would Seymour have been radicalized if he was financially stable and living in a safe, loving environment? What would you be willing to do in the name of success? Audrey and Seymour both know the struggles of Skid Row. Seymour grew up on the streets as an orphan, works a job for scraps and a Sunday off every 2 weeks. Audrey was raised in poverty by a single mother and finds herself in unhealthy relationships with men because she doesn't think she deserves better. Even when she imagines a life with Seymour away from Skid Row, it is characterized by mediocrity. She dreams of a small home in suburbia, filled with basic home appliances she's seen in magazines, and surrounded by a chain-link fence, not even a white picket one so popular in the American dream aesthetic. When she reveals to Seymour she's had to work in a sleazy night spot called the Gutter, wearing outfits she describes as cheap and tasteless, Seymour does not judge her for it. Their connection lies in the recognition of the lack of power to make wholesome decisions in a constant state of survival. This is why Audrey is able to sacrifice herself to the plant even though it was Seymour's actions that put her in that position in the first place. She understands Seymour's powerlessness and desire for a better life. This ending illustrates how people like Seymour can become a tool for capitalist gain which he himself is a victim of. The plant uses Seymour's impoverished state to acquire what it wants without caring what happens to him. Audrey 2 literally devours him in the process. It extracts every molecule of value from him. The plant is just quicker to do so than the executives who found Seymour suddenly marketable thanks to the plant. To quote the film's lyrics, "It's not a question of merit, it's about demand and supply." The average viewer of Hollywood films is trained to expect an ending where they can imagine the main character's story continuing beyond the film, thanks to most films following a similar structure. Think about it. If you repeat an action hundreds, maybe thousands of times, with similar results, and suddenly an opposite outcome happens, how does it make you feel? What happens in the viewer's psyche when the opposite of what they expect happens? Research shows that humans assign more weight to the ending of an experience. For this reason, human brains most likely undervalue experiences that started well but ended badly, and overvalue experiences that started badly but ended well. In this specific case, the viewer only identifies Seymour as the threat to humanity prophesied in the beginning of the film. When it's too late and Seymour is unable to mend his wrongs, not only are they sad because the main characters die, but they feel misled. Instead of re-evaluating the story through a different lens, the initial reaction is to be dissatisfied with the whole experience. The real-life consequence of this phenomena in cinema is that it limits decision-making power of creatives in a capitalist economy. Investors need their money back, ideally with a profit. Happy endings led to a bigger box office, even if it doesn't make as good of a story as a whole. Again, it's not a question of merit, it's about demand and supply. This is what we can learn from the test audience's reaction to the original ending of Little Shop of Horrors. Your willingness to accept an unhappy ending that adds weight to the rest of the storyline helps to support creative freedom in the free market of fictional ideas. So, the next time you see a happy ending, stop to consider, was it really worth it?
It was an unmitigated disaster. A total disaster.
This program thanks you for your sustained attention. Like, comment, and subscribe to
Bring on the meat.